MapleStory just overhauled its UI recently, so I want to show how it's changed over the years. Just to get this out of the way, for those that don't know, UI means user interface. It's the graphics and information that's shown on screen that isn't the actual game. All the windows and the health, mana and XP bars, etc. Starting with the only one I never got to experience firsthand, the UI they used in MapleStory's alpha and beta back in 2002. Yeah, Maple's that old. Starting from the login screen, which looked like this. Very simple, colder colors, and kinda classic with the older, more written looking logo, and what appears to be a building from South Perry. The world and character selects are both in a similar style, going for a type of style I'd normally associate with older early 2000s forums and user banners on said forums. Character creation was much more different too, opting for not only the infamous rolling die for what stats your character started out with, but all the character customization choices were from a drop-down menu, rather than buttons you could click to cycle through. Moving on to what it looked like in-game, the beta had some angularity to its UI, with octagonal buttons for your various menus, and most of your game information was shoved to the left and right corners of the screen. Over on the left was buttons for your items, equipment, stats and skills, the menu, all your various bars for health, mana, and XP, as well as your character name, level, and presumably class next to that. On the right was your hotkeys for your various skills and usable items, like potions. In the space between the two was the in-game chat window. Some point later on, this UI was eventually updated to a different bottom right hotkey layout, putting more emphasis on the keys above your arrows, also including shift, and just a blank space for clicking freely, and also now includes a button to the cash shop, which from everything I've scoured around for online, seems to just be what it stayed looking like from Maple's initial release in 2003 up until around like 2012 or so. I couldn't verify this for certain, as the only image of the beta cash shop I could find was from a private server, and I struggled finding any official examples or first-hand account pictures of it. Trading was also a thing way back when too, and the old UI for that looked like this. When previewing items by hovering over them with your mouse cursor, which looked like this way back when by the way, the details of said item would be this blue box with a bigger picture of the item and some various information of its stats or description of said items. The minimap back then was a lot simpler too, taking up way less space and providing way less information about your location, just bare bones showing you the map you were in. I like its simplicity. Lastly, ending off the beta UI, here's what character profiles used to look like. A preview of the character, their name, level, class type, number of fame, and something which I believe translates to community in Korean, with all the characters' equipped gear in the detail menu to the right of all that. Moving on to 2003 in Korea, or 2005 for global MapleStory over here in the West, we get into our first live, non-beta UI iteration, which is most commonly associated with old school or classic Maple. Now the login screen reaches its most iconic, recognizable iteration, being this storybook, illustrating a tree with mushrooms all around it, and a wooden sign for you to put in your login information. Later on at some point, Maple's logo changed from this more traditional handwritten looking font to this simpler, arguably cleaner looking one. Likewise, the World Select now also has a more wooden theme, with hang-up wooden planks for each world to choose from, and Wizit/Nexon cycling around the art throughout updates for various events or new patches, character releases, etc. A tradition that still goes on to this very day. When you choose a world, this new screen would pop up giving you a selection of channels to choose from. Character creation now also looked like this, stylized with the tree and wood theming alongside the rest of this new login. Gone now are all the drop-down menus, and now we just have arrows to toggle back and forth between selections. The dice is still here for now, but that eventually got removed, with the actual removal date being hard to officially track down. The best guess I have for that is older posts across numerous forums. This one from GameFAQs saying in V65 in early 2009, while a whole load of other posts mourning the loss of the dice citing V64. So it's safe to at least assume around that era of time as when it was removed. Not even Internet Archive has the official change date archived, as most iterations of MapleStory's old website remain inaccessible due to ruffle shenanigans. Anyways, moving on. Character select was also themed with the same trees and wood aesthetic, with all your characters being on this wooden platform. In fact, this entire login screen is one giant tree scrolling up. Once you hop into the game, you're now greeted with the UI known best as the pre-Big Bang UI. Your various bars are now all side by side in the bottom center of your screen. Chat is now collapsible and now more left-oriented and not taking up the bottom middle of your screen at all times. Your on-screen octagonal buttons for various UI elements are now missing, and your level is in its own little box, with each digit being in their own orange boxes. Additionally, the bottom right now has a collapsible menu for your hotkeys, as well as new buttons for customizing your keybinds, much bigger buttons for Cash Shop, Menu, and Shortcut, and these two areas, one for notifications, and I believe the other is mainly for party invites. This evolved over time to shrink down those buttons and icons over on the bottom right to become more stylized with their own icons, bringing back buttons for your inventory, equipment, stats, and skills. They also at some point added a trade button, which brought you to the Maple trade system, where players could buy and sell all kinds of items with Maple points and/or NX, rather than the in-game currency, Meso. Oh, and the cursor around this time also eventually turned into the iconic hand as you see it to this very day. When doing timed things like hidden dungeons, party quests, or other specific quests, the game used to have this style of timer that was a bunch of little circles making out the numbers, which eventually got replaced later down the line in future UI updates. However, remnants of it can still be found in-game, most commonly at all the Osiris-centric stations, displaying the in-game server time. Most of the menus retained a lot of the similar color palettes and style, but now with much less cold colors, a lot less angles on menus, and a bit more color in general everywhere. The minimap now had resizing options, and took up a bit more room with displaying your location, having a button to the world map, as well as just having this new border around it, complete with icons depending on what area of the world you were in at any given moment. The trade menu changed too, now with one extra slot, and listing the Meso fee tax that you lose when trading with others, as well as placing the chat on the right, and adding in a report button, presumably for combating those pesky evildoers trying to sell you counterfeit rubber boots. Or MapleBow 15. Character profiles now look a bit more different too, with again more splashes of color, and newly added buttons for a lot more interactivity. Trading, Cash Shop wishlist, Guild and Alliance sections, what mount you're using back when mounts were an important mechanic for faster transportation, and also this new button for Family, which was a whole system separate from guilds that ultimately was used mainly for teleporting to others quickly, to save a bunch of time walking to that place manually. I'd go into way more detail about it, but I'll cut it here for time, and because it got removed at some point. Here's what the Cash Shop looked like during pre-Big Bang. I think this is also how it looked during beta, but I could be wrong. Lastly, hovering over items now looked like this, being much more blue, and placing emphasis over what class type it was for, and in general just providing a bit more information specifically about equips you hovered over. Near the end of the pre-Big Bang era, they added in enhancements, which would eventually turn into what's now known as Star Force, as well as potentials to most equipment types. Here's a couple little fun pictures I took back when people found a way to hack Star Force to get crazy amounts of stars on equipment, resulting in things like this over 500 attack Stonetooth sword, and this 217 attack Red Craven. On December 12th, 2010, we over here in GMS got the Big Bang update, cited as the first major named update, if all these sites depicting MapleStory's history are anything to go by, and with it came an overhaul to the UI. At least how it looks. Functionally, it's practically the same. First off, yeah, the new login screen. Storybook aesthetic is mostly gone, only really being retained through the colors of the border, being like old pages. The login area is no longer wooden and now instead a light brown box, centered right underneath the game logo. Additionally, now the artsy vista of what looks to be some area around Hennesis or Lith Harbor, judging purely by the mobs in the corners. Upon logging in, the world select is now also themed with this papery aesthetic, as well as still cycling around the various event and update arts throughout the year. Character creation now has theming centered around the type of class you choose to play, but aside from that, and the dice now being gone, it's functionally still the same. Character select looked the same as pre-Big Bang for a bit of time, but eventually migrated over to this new one, having all your characters standing around on a tree, on a single platform that seemingly circles the whole thing on 2 levels. Moving to how things looked in-game, the UI functionally is the same as pre-Big Bang. Visually, it's got a slightly tweaked layout, a lot more gradients and gloss now, but mostly the same. Your character info is still towards the left, they changed the colors and fonts around. Your health and mana are still roughly centered, but now with your XP bar spanning the length of both your health and mana combined. With this Big Bang update, the resolution finally got a bump up to 1024 by 768 as well. If you choose that resolution, your layout changes even further, now placing your hotbar at the bottom right at all times, rather than being collapsible, and further adding 2 new buttons for Key Set for changing your keyboard layout, and Channel for changing around channels. This was also our first taste of what I can only describe as dark mode Maple, with UI elements mixing in lots of various black color schemes where once was flat, ungradiented whites and blues. Still a lot of blue though. The layouts for everything are still pretty much the same, just with a new slab of glossy paint coated over everything. Inventory, skills, stats, they're all still here as people remembered them. Much like the login screen, if I remember right, the cash shop looked the same as well, but eventually along the way evolved and got updated to this newer, less blue one. One new addition with a future update was the Professions system, which, funnily enough, has remained unchanged since its inception. It looks identical to this very day. Here's the trade window. Nothing new besides new colors and visuals, and here's the updated character profiles. Again, the same. The minimap had a slight update, adding in a new button for NPCs, as well as eventually including the first iterations of both Maple Guide and Quick Move, both of which remain in-game to this very day. One weird thing I totally forgot about until looking through all my old screenshots is this little window sticking out that housed, I think, Smegas, or maybe some special form of Smega that only showed up in that window, or something along them lines. I don't think it was around very long. Hovering over items was practically the same too, with one new addition for a very brief time being these items with red backgrounds instead of the usual blue. Going by these few screenshots I have, they were presumably for legendary variants of items. This layout stuck around for about 6 years, with one major resolution change giving a new widescreen resolution, being 1366 by 768, and Nexon/Wizit moving away from 4x3 being the focus. I believe that was sometime around 2013. The widescreen resolution gave even more customizable hotkeys at the bottom of your screen, and just extended everything further right. Everything to the left of it remained the same. Aside from that, they made the inventory wider at some point, eventually giving a setting to collapse it back to a more compact form, as well as changing the character stats and equipment windows. I thought skills as well, but I couldn't find image sources other than an old private server I used to play well over a decade ago, so not entirely sure about that one. Lastly, one thing I forgot to mention, at some point, they introduced the sidebar, which houses various quests, events, and information about events, among many other things over the years. On December 15th, 2016, Maple got a new UI with the 5th job update. The login screen, I believe, stayed the same, with them slowly moving away from a login screen at all over in GMS, and instead making players log in through the Nexon launcher, or Steam. World Select got a slight overhaul too, with the servers now being shoved all to the right, rather than hanging above. Channel Select changed slightly too. Character Select and Character Creation more or less carried over one-to-one from the last section as it evolved over the years, with eventually the Character Select screen displaying way more characters per page, bumping up from 8 to eventually 12. Going in-game, we can immediately see the UI is vastly different. The quick slot hotkeys are now semi-collapsible, chat is now horizontally resizable, your various menu buttons have been consolidated into these 6 buttons, 4 blue, 1 green for daily gift/events, and one orange one that brings you to the cash shop. Most notably though, the player name, level, health, and mana are now all centered at the bottom of your screen, and your XP bar spans the entire bottom width of the screen. Speaking of the chat window, at some point, they also finally added the option to pop the chat outside of the game window, in case you either wanted to see more of the game, or have the chat in a more comfortable spot on one of your monitors that wasn't in Maple specifically. Another thing that's also immediately noticeable, the entire bottom part of your screen is no longer blocked off. While you can't move around most of these elements, their sizes were brought down to a minimum, giving you slightly more vision at the bottom of your screen. A couple years later in late 2018, in the Black Mage Gathering of Heroes update, they updated the game's resolution to finally reach 1920 by 1080, which is the typical standard resolution for most screens nowadays. This gave even more visibility in the game, letting players see much more of the game. Inventory largely remained the same near the start, eventually moving all your cash shop equipable cosmetics over to a new tab called Decoration, letting players expand their inventory to a much wider version, showing all your slots at once, as well as removing a button that was for an old Ardent Mill-centric system called Item Pot, which let you raise either a rock or a plant for various profession-centric rewards. The game also introduced bags, which gave even more inventory space for specific types of items in practically every slot in your inventory, excluding equipment for whatever reason. The skills menu got a slight tweak, becoming slightly bigger and showing 2 columns of skills now rather than 1, as well as adding in 5th job among the ranks, of course. Stats window also changed slightly, now having a button to show detailed stats beyond just your class stats, health and mana, and damage range. There's now also hyperstats, which are various bonus stats you can choose freely, so long as you have enough points, that you get from simply leveling up more and more. Equipment changed like this too, with the inclusion of way more items to equip over time, with some even pouring out of the bounds of the equipment window. Emblems, secondaries, androids and hearts, arcane and eventually sacred symbols, loads of stuff. Additionally, more tabs specifically for your pets, android cosmetics, and also your very own cosmetics. Cash Shop got quite the overhaul this time around, in every way except aspect ratio. It's still a tiny 4x3 window, but now with a much darker theme, and everything moved around slightly. I think it got bumped up to 1024 by 768 resolution-wise at the least, so that's something. The clock timer for party quests and bosses and other certain timed whatevers throughout the game now look like this, to this very day by the way, presented more like a digital clock rather than numbers written out in light bulbs. Hovering over items has now migrated to a translucent dark gray background, mostly monochrome, and structured slightly different. Level and stats are less of the focus now that the game has mostly moved away from a focus on stat requirements to equip certain gear, and the class type is now highlighted in white rather than orange. There's also new various numbers in between that show a gear's increase in defense, boss damage, and IED, respectively. I personally kind of forgot those were ever there. They're just so small and tucked away between the other focus of everything. On June 1st, 2017, they introduced the Legion system, which with it brought not only new stats the higher your cumulative characters in your world totaled up to, but also its own window for managing your blocks and grid, and eventually coins, artifacts, raid, all kinds of stuff. Lastly, character profiles didn't really change much in this era either, but for a time, you could view other players' damage skins. Not just the one they were using, but all the ones they had available to use. Later on, they also added icons for the types of professions players had, as well as their highest floor of Mulong Dojo they've reached, and their current total Legion level. With the minor picnic update on March 20th, 2024, they revamped everyone's profiles to now essentially dox your entire character's stats. This is what it's like to this day, and it shows just about everything you'd want to see about a player. All their equipment coupled with said equipment stats, detailed breakdowns about all their various stats, even for things like their summon duration and item drop rate, their 5th job's V matrix and 6th job's hexa matrix progress, link skills, arcane and sacred symbol levels. It pretty much shows everything about a character except their inventory. With it also came this new stat, combat power, which gives a general idea of how strong a player is. It's supposed to be this type of power level you'd see in other MMOs to roughly estimate how strong someone is, and if said person is geared up enough and ready to tackle whichever boss is around their combat power level for their job. It fluctuates wildly between class types though, so two classes with about the same combat power won't necessarily be similar in damage, but comparing two people only of the same class type's combat power is a pretty accurate gauge. This UI stuck around for nearly 9 years, from late 2016 to 2025, making it the longest lasting of any of Maple's UIs over the years. And honestly, I'm inclined to say it's my favorite UI that Maple's had. Now that could entirely be recency bias, and the fact that I've used this UI arguably the most out of any other one throughout the game's history. That is entirely a fair point and probably true. I don't know. I just like the name, level, and health and mana bars all being dead center in this compact little rectangle, and the small buttons all being instantly recognizable by color and design. My opinion aside, it's time we've reached current day's UI. On September 24th, 2025, we got a massive overhaul that normalized widescreen across the board for nearly everything. I say nearly everything because in Reg Server, the auction house, formerly known as the MTS, is still 4x3 for whatever reason. Starting off with the new World Select, it's pretty much what the last one looked like, but now widescreen. A bit more bubbly over near the server selection too. It also now lists all your characters per world, which is kinda interesting. Channel Select now has a very white, frosty theme to it, and they've now also introduced Quick Login if you wanted to log back into your main without having to go through any other world or channel options. Character Select still displays 12 characters per page, but now lets you choose between a light or dark theme, and also tells you a character's XP percentage if you hover over them. You can now even see your highest levels at a glance by clicking the Job Progression drop-down menu. Character creation got a facelift, and now shows animated splash art for every character and class type. You still have the same menus to cycle through for character creation once you go to choose how your character looks, but yeah, it looks incredibly glassy. Once we get into the actual game, we're greeted with this. An even smaller UI taking up even less space, them trimming what little fat there was left of the UI around your quick slots and health bars, your name and level being shoved back into the bottom left corner, and now the menu is back towards the left, just like Maple's beta? While I do miss the color coding of these menu buttons, it is nice and kind of neat that you can customize them however you like. Have as many or as little buttons as you deem fit and or comfortable, just so long as that number doesn't exceed 9 custom buttons. Neat. The main menu housing all these choices went from a set of columns to look through one at a time, to now being this unmovable, frosted glass menu, showing every possible option of thing all at once. The only ones even color-coded anymore are Cash Shop and Auction House. Anyways, another notable change is nearly every window now being a different type of transparent gray. If you wanted an idea of what it used to look like, just toggle on the current skill menu. They didn't touch how that looks for whatever reason. The stats window likewise is the same as the previous UI's final iteration, already being themed with how the game now looks overall currently. Equipment on the other hand got a weird overhaul. They rearranged the layout order of all equipment, prioritizing weapon, secondary, and emblem being directly below your character portrait. How they changed this, I don't mind. But now, rather than having a bunch of tabs for your various other equipped things, your only other tab here is pets. Everything else is now in a whole new window dedicated to cosmetic decorations, like clothes, salon, android, and damage skins. Most importantly, back on the Equip tab, totems are valuables now. While some of this new equipment menu feels very unintuitive, like disabling decoration effects not being clear if you're using presets for gear with stats, or the Pets tab now housing options that used to be in the settings menu, it honestly doesn't feel that much more different or bad. People have strong opinions of a lot of these changes right now since we just got them all at once, but we'll see how the blow gets softened over time, especially if they improve upon this new UI. Moving on, hovering over items, specifically equipment, changed ever so slightly, now doing away entirely with required stats, and those various teensy tiny stat modifiers from the last UI iteration. They've now also color-coded tiers of potential lines, making it theoretically easier to spot prime lines, judging purely on the color of the square next to said gear. I say theoretically because it's kinda hard for me personally to see. Our inventory is not only scaled up much bigger, but I think they made it taller too. There's a search function, and now even dedicated buttons to accessing your Android's shop if they have one, as well as this new innovation that consolidates all your various bags throughout your entire inventory into one window. Before that, you had to double-click on every single bag you owned. One more thing while we're still over here in the inventory. This Enhance button now accesses the new Enhancement UI, where players will now do practically every type of gear enhancement except stamps. Currently, they'll probably be added here eventually. I will say right now it is quite annoying that it force moves your inventory every time you go to open it, as well as collapses your inventory if you have it expanded. That's besides the point. Here, you have options for Starforcing gear, flaming gear, cubing gear, enhancing certain things with exceptional hammers, if you possess both the hammer and an item that can be enhanced with one, like my eye patch, adding souls and swapping new souls onto weapons, restoring traces of boomed gear, using grindstones on Oz rings if you have a level 4 or 5 and want to take a chance to bump it up to level 5 or 6 respectively, and also one that lets you swap polished rings levels onto other rings if you ever wanted to do that for whatever reason. Gone are the days of dragging cubes or flames onto your gear manually. Now you can only do it through this menu. One new feature for Starforcing in specific that I really like is you can now disable the animations, as well as hold down space to tab, for those special events that previously required you to keep clicking through menus for gains. To end off everything, let's visit the cash shop to show how it was remade with widescreen in mind. You're now immediately greeted with a huge advertisement for whatever is being sold at the current moment in there, and your character is nowhere to be seen. The actual cash shop is only revealed once you click on a tab that isn't main, Maple Points, or MVP. There I am. It's essentially the same, with some function changes and things being rearranged yet again. It doesn't show mesos in here anymore. All the store tabs are at the bottom in roughly about the same spots they were before when they were still on the side. And now the inventory shows way more items, and even lets you sort through them by equipment type. Oh yeah, they also doubled just the decorations inventory for all characters, and nothing else. I kinda hope they give us all more inventory space for tabs besides decoration. And that's pretty much it. I know for a fact I didn't cover every single new UI change throughout this game's history, but I tried to cover as many bases as I could, within reason. At the very least, I did my best to cover the main important big ones that people remember. This was a fun video to research and piece together, and find out more things as I crawled through Maple's 2-decade past, and I hope you enjoyed watching it as much as I enjoyed making it. If you made it this far, thanks for watching. What's your favorite version of Maple's UI? I know I typically make guides, and I'll still most likely continue to do so in the future, if not restructure them a little bit. But if you like this style of video, and wanted more like this, you should let me know. You could type it in the comments, email it, carrier pigeon it if you have to, chase me down in-game if you feel you absolutely need to scream a video idea at me. Whatever you're comfortable with. Until next time, that's all.